Welcome viewers to Senior Teleclass on TEKTV. My name is Samuel Oben, your facilitator for government, SHS 3. Lesson 1. International Relations and Organizations. Now, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to trace the history of United Nations. You will be able also to show the activities of UN with respect to the enhancement of the life of the people of member states. You will also be able to recognize the contribution of Ghana as a member of United Nations organization. Lastly, you will also be able to outline the problems and challenges faced by the United Nations. A history of the United Nations. The United Nations organization was formed on 24th October 1945 at San Francisco to replace the League of Nations, which failed to achieve world peace. Now one will ask, what is League of Nations? League of Nations came to existence right after the First World War. So the First World War happened between 1914 to 1918. Right after the First World War, nations that were involved in the First World War resolved not to allow another war to happen again. So in place of that, they came out with the League of Nations, and they were tasked to ensure that there wouldn't be another world war. Now, unfortunately, after 1939, that is between 1939 to 1945, the Second World War broke out. It means that the League of Nations could not achieve their objectives, and that brought about the United Nations organization. Now, the charter was signed on the 26th June 1945 by the representatives of the 50 countries. Now, the membership, as it stands now, of the United Nations organization is 193. And you remember, 50 countries started it. And the charter was signed at San Francisco. Examples of some of these countries include Argentina, Brazil, Canada, South Africa, United Kingdom, USA, France, and Iraq. They drew the initial charter of UNO. The name United Nations itself was coined by American President by then, Franklin Roosevelt. He came out with the name. The United Nations had its headquarters or office in New York. The United Nations, I take it again, has its headquarters or office in New York. That is the headquarters of UN. And I'm sure that most of you would love to travel to New York one day, isn't it? Yeah. In fact, Ghana as a country joined UNO right after independence. You know that Ghana had the independence on 6 March 1957. So right after 6 March, on the 8th of March, Ghana joined UNO to be a member of UN. What is the aims or objectives of the United Nations? You know, United Nations was not set up just for fun. And I said it earlier. What are the aims and objectives of the UN? I said earlier, the League of Nations was tasked purposely to ensure that there wouldn't be a Second World War. So when UN was also formed, it was also tasked to ensure that there wouldn't be a Third World War. I hear some of you saying that there has been a Third World War. And to you, the Third World War is coronavirus. That's funny. Now, UN was formed to maintain international or world peace and security through the principle of collective security or maintenance of world peace. I would say collective security. It is not the duty of one country to ensure that there will be peace. It is about the entire countries forming UN to ensure that there will be peace or peace will prevail wherever they find themselves. So if you're in Ghana, Ghana as a country is to ensure that there will be peace, not only in Ghana, but also the other sister countries. Another aim for the formation of UN was to develop friendly relations among nations based upon the principle of equality of nations or self-determination. Equality of nations or self-determination. Equality of nations, it means that every sovereign country, Ghana is a sovereign country, Togo is a sovereign country, Nigeria is a sovereign country. A sovereign country is to see other sovereign country in the same level. Ghana is not supposed to undermine the sovereignty of Togo. Likewise, Nigeria too is also not supposed to undermine the sovereignty of Ghana. So that is the principle of equality of nations or self-determination for all people. Another aim for the formation of UN is to promote international cooperation in order to solve international economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian problems. It is not the responsibility of one country, but globally, we are to solve together, like this pandemic, coronavirus. You see that World Health Organization, collaboration with the rest of the countries, finding a way to come out, solve what is happening, what is dragging the entire world backwards. They are doing that in collaboration, in cooperation, and that is what UN stands for. UN was also formed to promote and encourage respect for human rights and freedoms in all countries of the world. under no circumstances, a country should rise and abuse the fundamental human rights of that country's citizens. No. Nigeria cannot come and abuse or undermine the right of the citizens of this country. It should not happen. We are to respect each other. And that is exactly what UN stands for. They believe that God created all men equal. And as such, every human being must have a right to live freely. Every human being must have his or her freedom. So for them, you cannot say that you are president of your country and you go on abusing the rights and freedoms of your citizens. Once you are a member of UN, they will rise against you and deal with you. That is why you remember when Laurent Gbagbo lost the election some years ago, he failed to step down, and based on that, over 3,000 Ivorians lost their life. He was arrested by UN. Why should you alone? Because of you, we lose 3,000 citizens in Ivory Coast. It means that he failed to respect their rights. They voted and they spoke, elected the one they think is supposed to rule them. So UN does not condone to those things. You remember Liberia too. Former president who was also arrested. So UN encourage respect for human rights and freedoms. Now, if you want to be a member of UN as an organization, if you want to be a member as a country, you want to be a member of UN, what are the principles? The United Nations Charter spells out clearly 4 conditions needed for the admission of new members. So if you want to be a member of UN, you have to meet this criteria. And 1, a state seeking admission or a membership must be a sovereign or independent state. Underline the keyword. Sovereign, independent state. When we say a sovereign, you must have gained your independence. You are not supposed to be under any colonial rule. It should be of your own. So a sovereign country will be allowed to be a member of UN. It means if you are under colonial rule, you cannot apply to be a member of UN. The second principle, a sovereign state that has declared its intention also to contribute to the maintenance of world peace and security. If you're a country that you don't support peace to prevail, even within your country or the world, you always want the rest of the countries to be at loggerheads, UN will never accept you. So you need to declare your intention to contribute to the maintenance of world peace. You have to ensure that, you have to accept the fact that you will help the UN to promote peace in the entire world. That is the second principle. A third principle, a sovereign state that accepts all the obligations of the United Nations Charter. The obligations of the United Nations Charter, and is willing and capable of carrying out the obligations. These are my country, these are my laws. You need to obey. You have decided to join UN. They will never come and beg you. You have decided to join UN. So the laws of UN, you have to obey. You should be willing to accept the obligations of UN. You cannot be a member of UN and decide to do your own things that are not, or that is incompatible with the Charter of UN. You have a problem with UN. So you should be able to carry out the obligations established by the Charter. You accept it, go by it. Now the last principle is that the state that is willing to comply with all the rules and regulations enshrined in the Charter. Good. The rules and regulations in the Charter, you should also be able to comply. It's not just a matter of accepting it, but to comply. You yourself must set example. That is why Ghana, being a member of UN, accepts the democratic principles of UN. So Ghana cannot be a dictatorial country, no. Ghana cannot decide not to organize elections. Then all of a sudden, they come out to the leader. How? That is not the rules enshrined in the Charter of UN. So you, being a member of UN, should be able to comply, should be able to obey all the rules and regulations established by the Charter. Principles upon which the UN was founded. UN did not come into existence for any reason, but based on certain principles. And one of the principles is the democratic principles. And from your first year, second year, when we talk of democratic principles, I'm sure you understand the rule of law, you understand them, elections. All these are part of democratic principles, a multi-party system. So the United Nations was founded to promote democratic principles through observations of elections in member states, donation of electoral materials, and discouragement of military rule. When election is taking place in Ghana, there are other UN sent election observers. Observers team come to the country to observe whether the election will be free and fair, whether the election will be transparent. The electoral materials too, they also assist. In fact, countries who want to adapt to military rule, UN will never condone to that. So once you're a member of UN, you should practice these democratic principles. Member states pledge to give assistance to the United Nations in any action it takes in accordance with the Charter. As a member, we will get to know that being a member of UN, you also pay your dues to assist UN. So when we get there, you will know. You need to assist UN either in a material, any other form that can make the organization function continuously. Members to fulfill the obligation they have assumed under the Charter in good faith. The Charter or the principles in the Charter that you have accepted in view of that to be a member of UN, you need to fulfill it when you are admitted, or the moment you assume to be a member. You have to fulfill those obligations. And we've looked at some of those obligations. I've talked about democratic principles. I said about rule of law. I also talk about multi-party democracy. You need to fulfill those obligations. Now, all member states must settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a way as not to endanger international peace and security. What does this mean? You remember, Ghana as a country had a little bit misunderstanding with Côte d'Ivoire over Ghana oil exploration, and was taken to UN courts, International Court of Justice. If Ghana had decided, in fact, Ghana decided to settle it with their Ivorian counterparts, but it could not materialize. So in order for this country not to have any dispute or misunderstanding with Côte d'Ivoire, the issue was taken to the International Court of Justice. And I'm sure you heard it. Somewhere around 2016, 2017, UN unanimously, the courts unanimously agreed that the area where the exploration of the oil was taking place was in the jurisdiction of Ghana. If Ghana as a country has taken it personal with that of Côte d'Ivoire, probably there will be a lot of misunderstanding. But the court settled it amicably. So that is what UN expecting every member country to do. That is by peaceful means, so that does not endanger international peace and security. Ivorians are in Ghana. Ghanaians too are also staying in Ivory Coast. So all the time, we need to ensure that there will be peace. Ghana too also had a problem with Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, some years back, around 1990. And the issue was also settled. Now, the next point, the organization is to ensure that permanent members and non-permanent members of the UN or United Nations organization do not act in any way that can be prejudicial. To the maintenance of international peace and security. We'll look at the permanent members and non-permanent members. In UN, the permanent members are 5, and then non-permanent members are 10. So we'll look at it detailed under the Security Council as an organ of UN. We'll look at the membership. Military assistance should also be provided by the organization in times of need. We also understand that when the war broke out in Liberia, UN also assisted. And then in Sierra Leone, they also assisted. That has brought peace in those countries. We'll look at it. The member states are to refrain from the threat or use of force in their international relations in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the UN. So, these are the principles upon which UN was formed. We've looked at the history of UN, how UN was formed, what brought about the formation of UN. We've also looked at the aims for the formation of UNO. If you're a member country and you want to be a member, if you're a country and you want to be a member of UN, the criteria involved and the principles upon which UNO was founded. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. We'll continue next time with the organs of the United Nations organization. But before we close, you take assignment. Assignment 1. Highlight 3 objectives of the United Nations. That is 1A. And 1B. Identify 2 principles upon which UNO was founded. Till we meet again, stay blessed and have a wonderful day. Bye.